Today, women and men are treated and considered as equals. Both are able to hold jobs, own land, and have a say in the leaders of America by voting. All these rights do not seem too unusual, just everyday possibilities that we as citizens of the United States have. Well, these rights for women didn't come so easily. For the last 150 years or so, women have been fighting for equality with men. Whether gaining the right to vote or being able to be put on the ballot, women's suffrage has come a long way. It all started with the Seneca Falls Convention, a gathering of feminists, abolitionists, women, and men who felt it was time for women to have a say. Through this convention, women were able to gain much ground in the United States. It sparked many ideas and voices from women who had been held down by men. So, if Seneca Falls was basically the starting point of the women's rights movement, how would America look today if the convention hadn't happened? Would women still have their equality that they had been fighting for over a century? Would there have even been a fight? Though only a 2-day conference held on July 19th and 20th, 1848, Seneca Falls was an 8-year process, all starting at the 1840 World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, England. Although invited to come to the convention, the women delegates from America were unable to participate in the debates and sat behind a partition away from the men. They were unable to get involved because of their sex at a convention refusing inequality. The women at the convention were outraged, among them Lucretia Mott, a Quaker minister and feminist, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, an active abolitionist. The two began talking and came up with their own idea, a convention for the condition of women. This convention would lay out all the wrongdoings done to women and having women accept the blame since they allowed themselves to be mistreated. The Seneca Falls Convention was held in Westland Methodist Church in Seneca Falls, New York. Over 300 people showed up, 40 of them being men. Even Frederick Douglass, a former slave and writer of the North Star newspaper, attended the convention. For the convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote up a Declaration of Sentiments, a document stating the ways women were mistreated by men and the government. All those who attended the Seneca Falls Convention were asked to sign the document, though only about 100 did, even some taking their name off after being ridiculed. The Declaration of Sentiments was modeled after the Declaration of Independence and was the basis for women's rights. Those in charge of the Seneca Falls Convention stated in the Declaration of Sentiments, "We hope this convention will be followed by a series of conventions embracing every part of our country." The women understood that one convention would not be near enough to gain the attention of men and the government and show them their injustices. After Seneca Falls, little regional conferences began sprouting up. About 2 weeks after Seneca Falls, Amy Post, a signer of the Declaration of Sentiments, held another women's rights convention in Rochester, New York. In 1850, 4 more conventions were held in Ohio. The first National Women's Rights Convention was held on October 23rd and 24th in Worcester, Massachusetts, in 1850. The conference was held to demand the rights to vote, to own property, and equal education. Every year after, until 1860, a National Women's Rights Convention was held. All these conventions were run by women and allowed them to create petitions about treatment or rules they felt were unfair. Women were able to stand in front of a crowd and give speeches to promote women's rights or rally the gathering into an idea. 11 states called to redraft their constitutions from 1846 to 1851 due to the increase of the women's rights conventions. These conventions really gave women their voice, and without Seneca Falls Convention sparking the women to speak up, it is doubtful they would have been successful or even happened. These conventions centered around this 9th resolution in the Declaration of Sentiments, not allowing women the right to the elective franchise or voting. All the resolutions in the Declaration of Sentiments were very important, but Elizabeth Cady Stanton stated, "The power to make the laws is the right through which all other rights could be reserved." This meant that if they were able to gain the right to vote, women would be able to gain other rights through voting. On August 18, 1920, women's rights to vote was ratified. When the resolution was first brought up at Seneca Falls, the press ruthlessly mocked the idea, though the negative attention didn't stop the conventions and feminist groups from protesting the unjust law. Seneca Falls sparked women to step up, not only in their community, but around the world. The Seneca Falls Convention led to more little conventions all over the country, which led to national conventions being held each year. All these factors, pursuing their goals with great determination, led the 19th Amendment being passed. Without Seneca Falls, women may have never been able to let their voices be heard. Though the first women's rights movement convention, Seneca Falls was also a turning point for African American men in the United States. The creators of Seneca Falls met at the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London in 1940. These women weren't just feminists but also abolitionists, fighting for justice for not only themselves but all those who were enslaved by laws that they were obligated to follow. Women fighting for their rights also fought for the rights of African American men, all being in the same boat. Frederick Douglass, a former slave, attended the Seneca Falls Convention, even giving a speech. Women, however, like the colored man, will never be taken by her brother and lifted to a position. What she desires, she must fight for. Women and African American men were held at about the same height, both unable to vote or own land or receive an education. American women and African American men seem to have formed a bond at Seneca Falls. Each helped the other gain the rights they deserved. Without Seneca Falls, it seems unlikely the two different types of people would have been formed together. Like the Declaration of Sentiments stated, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This means that men and women, whatever race, are all equals and should be treated that way in order to fulfill the promise made in the Declaration of Independence. Women fighting for their own rights put a hold to women's suffrage to help out with the Civil War. The American Women's Suffrage Association rallied hard for African American men to be given the right to vote. Solely made up of women, they believed that the 15th Amendment, giving African American men the right to vote, would not be passed if it included giving women the right to vote. They momentarily gave up their struggle for their own right to be passed to help African American men get what they also wanted. Without the Seneca Falls Convention, it seems so hard to believe that the 15th Amendment would have been passed. The Seneca Falls Convention was the match lighting the stick of dynamite known as women's rights suffrage. Women really gained their voice, learning that they had a voice and were able to use it to tell the nation their unhappiness for the way they were being treated. The Seneca Falls Convention brought up many issues women had with the United States laws, like women being seen as civilly dead if married, or that all colleges were closed off to them. The main issue, women being unable to vote, was an issue that the women at the convention and all over the country felt was one they could not give up on. And not just women being turned away from that right, but African American men also. Seneca Falls was just the start of women taking initiative, and without the convention taking place, it seems unlikely women would have gained all the rights that they have today.